Hi, James. Welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Tired, but that's kind of par for the course these days for me.
That's the usual. It's good to see
Uh,
you.
Good to see you as well.
Would you mind sharing what your story is? How did you catch COVID and what has the impact been for you?
Sure. So not entirely sure exactly where I caught COVID from. I have a few theories, but the one thing that's I guess frustrating for me is that I took this pandemic very seriously from the get-go. Hand sanitizing up the sort of gazoo and really took it very seriously for the whole year. And then over Christmas time, holiday time, um, I succumbed or whatever came to the pressure of my family to go to the UK and spend Christmas there with them. Which obviously was a mistake because somewhere along that process, my wife and I caught COVID and then spread it to the rest of my family,
Oh
uh,
dear.
which was frustrating, especially being that there's multiple times I sort of was saying to everybody I didn't think it was a good idea, and trying to you know prevent the sort of the thing going ahead. But I kind of got to a point where I was like, you know what, I've been so good. I've listened to all the rules, and it took us an assessment, and I thought, well, it can't be that risky, and decided to take the jump and ended up with it. So it's one of those things where I'd love to have a smoking gun, but I don't.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, yeah, my wife started feeling unwell, and then I got unwell. Then my brother-in-law got unwell, and then my sister and my brother-in-law, and we think maybe even their baby got it. It was just a bit of a nightmare. Somehow my dad avoided it, even though living in a one-bedroom apartment in the UK with my mum.
Wow.
And yeah, then the whole experience of COVID for me was quite an odd one. Was feeling fine. Went for a spin, unless like the day before I ended up in hospital.
When you say a
Um,
spin, do you mean you went cycling?
yeah, on my bike. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
nothing intense. Me and my wife worked out throughout the whole time she had COVID. So and I kind of
Oh,
assumed we got it at the similar time. So I had the audacity to say to her, like, maybe I'm asymptomatic because I was feeling absolutely fine. We woke up one morning, and I made pancakes and we're watching a TV show, and I just said to her, I said, feel a bit odd. And what happened was I just started getting this sort of weird sensation tingling over my whole body, and I started getting a bit dizzy. I went and lay down for a bit, and it went away. So I came back, said I'm feeling a bit better, and then about 20 minutes later, it happened again. So I called my doctor, and then the next time it happened, I felt absolutely horrendous. I started breaking out into a cold sweat. My heart rate went crazy. I just felt disgusting. So I asked my wife to take me to the hospital, and they took me there. The hospital did a bunch of tests on me. Um, Came back that I was healthy, had no lung issues, nothing a concern, just a bit of tachycardia. Sent me home and just said keep resting, and I just ended up staying in bed for another week. Had some lung issues, some chest pressure, that kind of whatnot, but it was just kind of like a bad flu. Slept through a lot of it, and then about a week later, got up and started feeling better. Took my negative test. Went out, played golf with some friends, went back to the gym, and then probably about a week or so after all that, a few days after that, I started feeling dizzy again, and then started feeling very dizzy, very unwell, and kind of the same thing happened all over again. Ended up back in the hospital, and then since then I've just basically been stuck in this cycle of long COVID for 5 months now. So I had a week of my life back, but then it was cruelly ripped away from underneath me.
so when you say long COVID, it doesn't mean you still have COVID. It means the long-term effects of COVID, correct?
Exactly,
Because that's how you got your
exactly.
negative, your negative
Exactly.
test.
Yeah, I tested negative, and again declared myself that I defeated this, and I was, going to get my life back, started to work again. But long COVID doesn't necessarily mean that you continue to test positive. And one of the theories is that the virus is lingering in your body, and that's causing people to remain ill, causing inflammation and all that. And I think that's actually a really good point to call out, is that it's called post-acute COVID syndrome or long COVID, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every single person is going through the same thing. A lot of the symptoms are overlapping, but it seems that there's, tens, if not hundreds of different potential things that people can be experiencing and going through. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm in a way being fortunate that I've received one diagnosis for one of my symptoms. Unfortunately, it's not a good diagnosis,
Would
but
you
you know,
share with
I've got
us what that was?
yeah. So I've been diagnosed with a condition called POTS, which is posterior orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which interestingly enough is found 90% in young women, of which I am not. It continues to defy the odds, I suppose.
Yeah.
Um, and that just basically means that, in the simplest terms, is that when I stand up, my heart rate jumps. But the problem with POTS, it's a form of dysautonomia. And what dysautonomia is, it's a dysregulation of your autonomic nervous system. And I think the autonomic nervous system is something in our body that we don't give enough credit to or understand. I didn't really know much about it until all this, which is, how these things work. But it basically controls all your bodily functions, from your heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, et cetera, et cetera. Is all done through your nervous system. And my nervous system's essentially out of whack. So I started sweating again, which is good. But for a while, I wasn't able to sweat. I'm not able to sweat to the same level I used to.
Wow.
Um, Obviously my heart rate, blood pressure, like every sort of function in my body is just kind of out of whack. Like my vision's kind of gone and all blurry. I've got severe brain fog. I'm extremely fatigued, all the time. I get waves of feeling better.
What does
uh,
brain fog mean? Is that just when you forget things that are happening?
it just, yeah, it feels almost just like I'm living in a cloud, or my head's in a fishbowl constantly. And yeah, it's hard to kind of re-describe it. Like, yeah, I was just trying to think of, for example, what I did yesterday, and it takes me a while to recall that. And I appreciate that's not abnormal, and maybe I'm, overthinking things, but it sometimes just feels like I'm not really like living here anymore. Everything's so like, it's not as clear, as crisp as it was before. It's almost like I'm sort of stuck in purgatory almost. It's kind of how I can explain it. It's a very odd feeling. It's just
Yeah.
my brain's just not working properly.
Yeah.
So everything just seems a bit loose, lucid maybe, or I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's a
Mm.
side of me that keeps wishing that I am going to wake up one day and this has all been a big nightmare.
Yeah,
But
that
it
must be
feels,
so hard on your mental health as well, because, this isn't something that doctors really understand.
yeah, definitely. I would say that's been a severe challenge, is
Yeah.
becoming mentally strong through this. And
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. I'm seeing great doctors. I'm getting a lot of great help here on island, and I'm also heading over to a specialized parts clinic, hopefully soon, in the Johns Hopkins, to help me with some of the management of some of those symptoms. But yeah, it's tough when the medical world doesn't really know what's going on, and there's no clear understanding on if I will ever get better. You
Yeah,
know,
that's the scariest thing I'm sure you feel is, when is the end to this? So,
yeah.
so with POTS, so the long COVID led you to getting, sorry, COVID led you to getting POTS. Is that
Exactly.
is that how you just describe it? Okay. So how
Yeah.
many people, I know there's not enough research out there, but like from the research that I'm sure you've done, how many people, get long COVID who get COVID?
So the numbers out there, anywhere between 10% and 30% of people have long lasting symptoms following
Wow.
COVID.
That's really
So
high.
yeah, it's not an insignificant number. And I think that's something that quite frankly, I think we as a society have kind of swept under the rug, and hasn't been, until lately, kind of, shared on the media and the news and what have you. Like I'd heard a little bit about long COVID prior to getting COVID and getting this, but it was always just like, you're young, you're fit. Like I was one of the healthiest I've ever been in my life prior to this. Um, I'll be fine. And if you get long COVID, you're just kind of, under the weather for 3 months or so, which would suck. It's kind of similar to like mono or glandular fever. But what's kind of come apparent or come clear, as of late, is that there's people out there who are, 16 months, 15, 16 months into their long COVID ordeal, and they're still not getting any trace of their former life back.
Wow.
Um, and
Yeah.
there's plenty of people that are far worse than I am. I mean, I've on some of these online forums, and there's people out there who are, unable to get out of bed in the morning, and shower independently, and do anything. Like I can exist,
Yeah.
But that's about it. Like, I'm not living.
Yeah.
Um, but it's, and I'm, I guess, considered lucky, and I have to believe that yes, I will make a full or near full recovery. And and
Mhm.
there are people out there who are, but it's definitely not everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
And it must be hard to try and, there's this thing like toxic positivity. Like sometimes you just want to feel how you're feeling and walk through that pain. But it must be hard because you feel like that's constant.
yeah, it's just, another way I kind of explain it to people is like I wake up every day with like the world's worst hangover for
Oh
5 months
my
now. It's just like that kind of feeling. Like it's just you feel sapped and drained, and yeah, and it's hard to be positive
God.
when you're feeling, and again, kind of comes with the sort of the turf in the sense of dysautonomia is a dysregulation of everything. So my hormones can be out of whack. So sometimes when I'm just feeling depressed or sad, it's like there's not a lot I can do because it's just my
Yeah.
body's just not functioning properly. So it's shooting things out. Then
Yeah.
obviously if you start to fester and perpetuate in that, it can be worse. Um, but yeah,
I
it's
think
not been easy.
I think what you said is a bit interesting because it aligns with like the research I've done. You said you were the healthiest you've ever been.
Hmm.
From what I've read, it seems like the long-term effects of COVID are impacting, like what you're going through are impacting really healthy people. And I think that's where this illusion of, oh, I'm young, I'm healthy, I'll be okay, can actually be very dangerous.
Absolutely. I think that's, one of the most dangerous sort of approaches that you can have. Anybody who gets COVID, you're essentially rolling the dice. I mean, the one thing that this disease has proven is it's completely unpredictable, right?
Hmm.
You've got people who are, obviously there's some predictability in the sense that older people are less well off, but that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of young people. And if you read what's going on in India and Brazil and what have you, even in the US, a lot of the patients are now young people in the hospitals. And they're coming out with, chronic lung issues. Like I don't have any of that, which I guess is lucky in some regard. But, at the same time, it's it's just it's scary that people are out there just thinking, oh, I can just bounce, this will bounce off me, and you don't know if you're going to be one of those people that pass away, or you're going to be stuck with something that's long lasting, that could be lifelong, like me.
Yeah.
And it's and viruses have always there's always been a wave of people with viruses who've done poorly. um, Again, that's something that kind of feels being swept under the rug a little bit, like a little bit about that, but not to the extent that we're seeing with COVID, I guess, is the difference. But yeah, just because you're fit doesn't mean that you're not going to end up here.
If you had had the vaccine, you might not have caught it and you might not be in the position you are in today. Have you
I
been able
believe
to
that.
receive it? The
Yeah, I've
vaccine?
received
Yeah.
both doses of my vaccine. There was articles going around about long haulers improving after the vaccine, and I've read a lot about that. Unfortunately, I guess I improved a little bit, but I wasn't one of those people that miraculously woke up the next day feeling back to my normal self. I was kind of hoping that would be me, but sadly that was not the case. But even so, like no one knows what the long-term impacts of COVID are. Like, will I be able to get medical insurance when I'm in my 70s or 60s, right? Like,
I never
I
thought
don't
about
know. They
that.
might look at you and just say, "Oh, you've had long COVID," and all of a sudden, anyone who's got or had COVID, anyone who's had COVID is going to be predisposed to X, Y, and Z. Like, no one knows how this disease or illness is going to unfold as life goes on. And
Yeah.
yes, the vaccine, people are kind of saying the same thing, but like the vaccine is in a controlled measure, and what have you. With COVID itself, you just don't know what's going to happen, what you're going to get,
Hmm.
right? Like it's a much safer dice roll to go ahead and get the vaccine
Yeah.
than to roll the dice with this virus. Yeah, and again, like with any vaccine, there are odd cases of people that react badly,
Hmm.
and that's unfortunate, and that's the same thing with me. Like I would have got the vaccine and reacted badly. I don't know, but I still would have done it because it's the right thing to do for society, or But yeah,
Yeah.
you just don't know, right? And it's so tough then, if you're that one person,
Yeah.
then to be like, man, I wish I hadn't done it.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. And I think it's hard. maybe for you, it sounds like you're living with like a little bit of like the regret of going to England to be with your family. You know, you keep thinking, well, what steps could I have not done to get me into this position, which must be really hard.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not healthy to fester in that sort of, what if scenario.
Yeah.
But it's just it's particularly frustrating because, I felt like I was the only voice in my family,
Hmm.
taking it seriously. um, and I just sort of I knew it was the wrong decision, and I stuck with it. Even my wife said we shouldn't go, and
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was completely out of character for me. And for what? Like, all I had to do was wait another 2 or 3 months, and I had a chance to get the vaccine. Like, it was the ultimate sacrifice for such little gain. Like, yeah, it was a nice trip, but if I mean the typical runtime on parts is people will feel, if you improve, which is 50% of people will improve with parts, um, of
That's a
which,
high chance. That's a high chance.
yeah. Well, the way I'm putting it in my mind is that, men apparently to have a better chance, and younger and healthier people also have a higher chance. So,
Yeah.
I'm increasing those odds for me, whether that's smart or not, that I will make a good recovery. But it's between 2 to 5 years a lot of the time.
Mhm.
That's a long time to be kind of waiting and hoping that maybe it's just going to disappear. So,
Yeah.
and I said to my family, I said, it'll always be next Christmas. And, who knows, every other Christmas for me for the rest of my life might now just be tarnished by this last one, or maybe 1, 2 to 5. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a depressing thought, let's put it that
Mhm.
way. And
Yeah.
I think the other piece of it that's extremely depressing is that, I recently got married in June last year.
I remember
And
congratulating you. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah. And, I'm now asking my wife and partner to sort of join me on this ride. We're both in our 30s, we're both 30. And here we are now of, things that we're meant to be thinking about as a newlywed couple are gone out the window, and it's now focused on, getting me back to some sort of level of normality so we can go on and hopefully live our lives together. But it's tough when there's no guarantee that this is going to go away.
Yeah.
um, and the talk about mental, health. I mean, the mental impact or mental health impacts on her, my parents, my family, everybody. Like, it's not just me that's suffering, it's a huge net. My friends, um, everyone's just sort of, yes, I'm doing the physical suffering, but they're suffering alongside as well, because it's tough to see somebody, with the life ahead of them, kind of get the rug pulled out from underneath you so
Yeah.
suddenly. um,
Yeah.
and I think that's the hardest part. And I'm one of millions of people out there potentially going through this. And, you know, is there going to, are we going to find a way to fix it? I don't know. But
Mm.
it's awful to think that if
Yeah.
I could be the only person in the world doing this, I would, because no one else should be going through this.
Yeah. And you said it's about 10 to 30% of people do get long COVID. Have you met anyone else who has?
Not here in Bermuda, but I've communicated with a few people in the UK. I've spoken with a girl who's actually, doing really well. She's a year or so out, and she's back to running 5Ks and living a good life again, and back to work. Again, our symptoms were similar. Some of them, the fatigue mainly being one that's similar. She had a non-linear like progression. Um, so I'm hopeful and optimistic that I can follow her in that path. I don't know if my POTS symptoms are driving everything, or if that's just one of the things that I have going on in my body. Like, it's so hard to know. Um, but yeah, but really, I haven't found too many people outside of these sort of online support groups that I follow. But then they almost become a bit of an echo chamber, because you're kind of getting everybody who's feeling awful or on those, and you're not getting the people who are improving really, because they're just.
Mm.
So it's hard to, you feel very, very alone. And yeah, it's not easy.
No. So for you, what do you want people out there to know?
um, that this could be you. Yes, the odds are not likely that if you get COVID, you're going to end up with long COVID. but
Mhm.
it's really just like it's not worth risking it.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that the vaccine could have prevented me from being in this position and has prevented other people from being in this position. And unfortunately, the vaccine is preventing people from dying.
Mm.
Um, so my main message to people is like, if you can, you should go and get the vaccine.
Yeah.
That's from my perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and I think people would feel silly if they didn't and ended up in this position. Now, of course, it's at the same time, some people may end up getting the vaccine and end up, with POTS or long COVID as well. Like it's not a impossible probability, but it seems that it's far less likely that that's going to happen with the vaccine than them actually catching COVID. But
Yeah.
then, but do it for do it for yourself, but also do it for the others around you. The thing that I'm finding the most challenging about all of this is the fact that I'm having to ask my wife now to basically, potentially sacrifice up to 5 years of her 30s in hope that I'm going to be one of that percentage of people that improve. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it sucks. That's not lost on me of that. And then we may get to the end of the 5 years, and I'm still kind of where I am today, which is, bedridden a lot, unable to work, unable to go do any exercise, you know, can't handle heat, can't really do much without just collapsing all the time.
Yeah.
It's and then you get there, and then what? Like,
Mm.
it's not. To do it for your loved ones, and then on top of that, it's my parents. My
Yeah.
dad and mom are just retired, and now they have to think about supporting their 30-year-old son potentially.
Mhm.
You know, that's the message to me. Is it's not just you that's going to suffer.
Yeah.
Um,
But I also want you to know that, you might feel like you're putting this weight and pressure on everyone, but this is what family and loved ones are for. Life would not be easier without you. If, from a mental health perspective, I want to make sure you know that. I'm sorry, I can see you're getting emotional, but I lost a friend of mine to suicide, and I just hear it in what you're saying. And I just want you to know that, I'm sending so much love to you, and no one in your family would be better off without you right now.
it's just tough. It's just hard. You feel like you're a burden or what have you, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
But I'm so lucky that I have a wonderful support network.
Yeah.
But it just really also sends my heart out to those millions of people out there with invisible illnesses. All
Mhm.
those, so POTS is typically an illness that affects women,
Yeah.
and women take often like years longer to get diagnosed with POTS than men because they, people just say, oh, you're a woman, you're being neurotic or what have you, and there's millions of women out there who are suffering with this invisible illness that's being neglected and rejected by society and put up as being fake, or and then there's people with chronic fatigue and all these things that just get swept away because it's and I get it, they're not sexy because a lot of people don't get better. We live in this world of it's just you're meant to be sick and you're meant to get better, but some people out there don't. And now I'm sort of looking down the barrel. That's my potential eventuality, and yes, I've got to do everything I can to fight and believe that I won't be, and maybe I'm one of the lucky ones that skirt this. But you know, for those millions of people out there that haven't, and I could well be one of them. It's awful, and I just don't understand how this is something that I'm only hearing about or finally understanding today. That's something that I don't get.
Yeah.
We should be this should be something that's more well known about.
You're
um
doing an amazing job putting it out there. You're pushing on, you're getting that message out there. You could be doing a lot of good by other people hearing this and going, "You know what? That could be me." And I need to make sure I do everything I can to prevent this.
that's my goal, right? Like, if I can, as I said, when I did some news shows here in Bermuda and whatnot,
Yeah, it's
because
huge.
we're having problems with people wanting to sort of take this virus seriously, let alone getting the vaccine, but just taking it seriously in general. And I just said, if I can prevent one person from catching COVID and potentially dying or ending up with this, it makes the suffering that I'm going through that much more meaningful, right? Like, it just
Yeah.
gives some purpose to this, because it's hard to feel like there's any purpose anymore, and that's kind
Yeah.
of, I needed to feel like that I was trying to help, and I don't want to sit here silent.
Yeah.
No one should go through this, and why put it at risk, right? That's what I don't understand, is it's not like it's just something that everyone just shakes off.
Yeah.
And if even if I knew there was a 0.00001%, whatever it is, that this would happen to me, I guarantee I'd have done, probably those are probably the odds. I would have done things a lot different, right? Like, it's just, you know, I don't think people fully understand that this could be you,
Yeah.
full stop.
Mhm.
Why risk it?
Yeah. For you, what message do you want to, I know you feel alone in this, you said you've met a couple other people, but this podcast, could reach people who are going through similar things. What advice would you give to people?
I mean, it's hard to do, but try and stay positive, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is always a chance, and there are people out there who are getting over these things, and there are people out there that are getting better. And just because of what I have doesn't mean that you have the same things, right? There's everyone's got slightly different things going on with the long COVID. Um, it's just don't give up, really. Sometimes it feels like that's an easy option, but it's not. Like, you've got to keep going, and keep hoping that there is going to be more understood about this. I mean, if the numbers truly are the millions of people out there that are suggesting, I mean, this is going to be something that's going to impact society in a terrific way,
Yeah.
terrific in a bad way.
Yeah.
So there's stuff is going to have to be done, things are going to have to change.
Mhm.
And let's just hope that most people find their way through this to a recovery,
Yeah.
but we just don't know. And dealing with uncertainty is something that I am finding very tough.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to use your support network as much as you can, and as you said, Jess, that's what they're there for. Um, and there are communities out there that are helping people together. I mean, be careful with those, because you don't want to read
You don't want to scare
everything and
yourself.
anything, yeah,
Yeah.
because you can end up in a very dark rabbit hole. Specifically, some of the stuff that the pot stuff is not exactly all rainbows and butterflies.
Mhm.
But I'm also a realist, so just the way my brain works. But it's there are people out there who are getting over this, and I keep telling myself that. And I've met this girl Hannah, like, she's getting her life back, and she's a real motivator to me. And just chatting to her, she's further down the line, and I just keep thinking, okay, if you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
I wish there was more groups out there of survivors who are that are putting messages out there, positivity, and it's more clear. You know, one of my concerns is the reason why there isn't that is because there aren't that many. But
It's new though, like you said, this
yeah,
is what, and maybe that can be you who starts it.
yeah, just trying to think how to how to do that. But so yeah, it's tough. I wish I had something, a more positive message to be giving to everyone who's out there suffering with this, outside of the fact that you're not alone,
Hmm.
and that there is hope,
Yeah,
and that we just have to keep fighting for that.
absolutely.
And I think you're right. The mental health is the most challenging piece to this a lot of the time. Um, but as I said before, it's not just my mental health; it's the mental health of my wife, my family, my friends as well. Like, it's there needs to be I don't know, more done for people who are full-time carers
Yeah.
of significant others and loved ones. Like, it's the stress and the burden it puts on them is something that I think often gets brushed away. Everyone
Mhm.
sees me, I'm the one who's physically looking unwell. I mean, I've lost like 25 pounds. I don't look like the James that I was prior to all this. um, and everyone's like, oh, are you okay, how's things going? But no one is asking my wife, my mom and dad, how are you doing through this? Because they're not the ones that are physically representing their illness. And I think we spoke about this a while ago, Jess. I had a really bad knee injury a couple of years ago, and the main thing that I found through that was like the second my knee looked better and I wasn't walking around on crutches and a brace, even during that period, everyone could see that, oh, that must have hurt, and I was like, yeah, it did, and it kind of sucks, but it was the mental piece of what does this mean for my life, because I was and would like to be a very active person again. But could I ever ski again? Could I play these sports again? All that stuff, you know, that you can't see. It's the mental piece that's hidden and away. And
Yeah.
now I'm kind of doing that all over again, but it's my whole body. It's not just my knee that I can't use properly. It's my whole body.
And I thought of you,
Um,
I thought of that when I heard the news, because it's about asking the right question. It's not so much
exactly.
how are you feeling necessarily. That's a great question.
Yeah.
But remembering to also ask, how's your mental health? How are you doing?
Yeah. How are you doing? And it says not just the person that is physically representing some sort of illness. It's the people around them that are also
Yeah,
need your support and need support as well. And
that's actually
that's just
such a good point. Yeah.
I think that's just a message that I really wanted to get out there, because without my network, I would be lost right now. And
Yeah.
I think it's just an important piece of this awful experience. But
Mhm.
for everyone to sort of remember, like, yes, you may have a friend going through long COVID, and it's good to reach out to them and give them support. But please also reach out to their significant other, their family, and ask them as well, because they also need your help.
That's so insightful, James. Thank you so much. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on today. And I'm sending you all the love.
Yes. Thank you, Jess. Pretty good to see you.